All right, here we are at CBDNA in Kansas City, and we are joined by Jerry Junkin, the director of bands at UT Austin. How are you, Jerry?
I'm doing great. So my pleasure to be here today.
Well, it's great to have you. You've got a lot of interesting things going on in your life and in your career that I want to touch on. But I first wanted you to maybe tell us a little bit about your program on Saturday evening here at the conference.
Sure. First of all, we're very excited just to be here in the first place and play in this magnificent space. For the people who are joining us online, I hope that you can get some sense of how incredible this hall is. It's really a masterpiece, architecturally, acoustically. So I had come up here, I had seen the hall before, and so I knew that there were some unique possibilities. First of all, this incredible Cassavant organ. So we were attempting to take into account all of the opportunities that might be available to us. So the program actually begins about 10 minutes before the on-stage concert will start. We're going to play in the lobby a fanfare by a gentleman by the name of Andrew Boss, which many people in our audience might begin to be familiar with Andrew's work just because he's written several very successful pieces in his brief career. Will be a freshly minted Dr. Andrew Boss, a DMA in composition just in a few weeks now. But as we are doing this, the UT Symphony is performing his second symphony, giving the world premiere of that. He's writing his third symphony for the Dallas Winds. It'll be premiered next year. So already he's got a catalog of works. He's an extraordinarily talented person. So we're playing this fanfare. I had asked him if we could adapt for this an earlier fanfare that he had written for a larger ensemble, Millennial Inception, which is a really wonderful piece, to play in the lobby. And he said, sure, I'll work on that on a flight. And then he got inspired, and so he dashed off this piece while he was on an airplane flight, hence the title, In Flight 787. But it's a terrific fanfare, I think. We had played this concert in Tuesday in Dallas at the Meyerson Symphony Center, and that concert was sponsored by the Dallas Winds. Those concerts always begin with a brass fanfare in the lobby. So because that was a bit of an expectation, we thought we would just do that here as well.
Very cool.
So we start with that, and then a piece that as soon as I saw the Kauffman Center and knew that the conference would be here, and I think one of the reasons, maybe one of the motivations for even applying to perform here is the fact that it's a great hall and this amazing organ. So we wanted to use that in some way. So we're beginning the concert with an incredible piece by Stephen Montague, an American composer, but he's an expat living in England for almost 40 years now, and has written some very intriguing music. But this piece, Entrada 1631, is based on this little liturgical fragment that then just is, the treatment is exceptional. It grows and grows and grows, and it features the pipe organ. And for whatever reason, people don't seem to know of that piece very much. And so it deserves a much wider audience and many more performances than I think it has received. So I'm hoping that that will stimulate some more interest in the piece. But it's fantastic. And there's a big surprise ending, which I'll let the cat out of the bag. Hopefully our audience here won't know that. But the piece becomes shattered at the end. It just explodes. And so there are players that will have entered into the hall, around 20 people playing triangles and another 20 string players.
Wow.
In this case, coming from Steve Davis's Kansas City Youth Orchestra. And so they play this very fast tremolo, which just ends up decaying down into nothing with one or two little triangle notes over about a minute and a half. So the piece just explodes, and then just you hear the fragments all falling away. So
wow.
It's a very dramatic piece, I think.
You're good at describing music. I feel like I just saw it.
One of these days, I'll try doing it for a living.
Just learn a little stick technique, and I think you could go places,
I'll give it a
Jerry.
shot. Thank you.
That was a very vivid. I'm excited. I can't wait for that.
It's a wonderful piece.
Cool.
And Stephen, I'll have to say, all of the composers are here, so we're excited about that too. Stephen is here. We have a rehearsal tonight. He'll be able to join us for that. We're recording this on, believe it or not, it's not live, but we're recording this on, what day is today? Thursday, correct?
Thursday.
Okay, Thursday.
I was going to say,
We've been on the road.
I woke up in Washington, D.C., and it's not even noon yet, so why are you asking me what day it is? Because I don't know.
Exactly. And then, after that, we're doing the
Crigliano?
John Corigliano's Clarinet Concerto, which is a you're not supposed to say this, but it is an absolute masterpiece. And this is the 40th anniversary of that piece, which is staggering to think of. 1977 had its first performance by Stanley Drucker in the New York Philharmonic,
Wow.
conducted by Leonard Bernstein on that performance. And the piece sounds like it came out of him yesterday. It's unbelievable to think that it's 40 years old.
Love his music.
It's spectacular. And this is a premiere of sorts of this version of it, the wind ensemble setting, which I'm happy to say he's quite thrilled with. And Craig Davis, one of our DMA graduates, who's now the director of bands at University of Tennessee, Chattanooga, did a staggering transcription of this piece. So it's really an incredible work. And our clarinet soloist is Jonathan Gunn, former principal clarinet of the Cincinnati Symphony, who's now on our faculty at UT as our clarinet professor, and he just plays the whammy out of this thing. So it's I think it's going to be very exciting. And I don't know that this is the sort of piece that you can obviously experience it on recording and in video, but it's very difficult to get the impact of it without being live and in person, because this was the first piece that he wrote that uses antiphonal players out in the hall. So there are 2 antiphonal clarinets, 2 antiphonal trumpets, 5 antiphonal horns circling the audience. And when that comes in the third movement, and from that point on for the rest of the piece, it's about as exciting as anything you'll ever hear.
Wow.
So that's
First half, right?
First half, and we're actually doing it without intermission. We'll need to take a little bit of a time to reset the stage, but then we're giving a world premiere of a piece by Jennifer Jolly, composer who originally is from California, went to Cincinnati Conservatory and is now on the faculty of Ohio Wesleyan University. Wonderful composer who she and I are colleagues at Interlochen in the summer. That's where I first encountered Jennifer. And the title of the piece is "The Eyes of the World Are Upon You." And I was approached a little over a year ago by one of our student organizations, the Kappa Kappa Psi chapter, and they wanted to commission a piece for the wind ensemble, which I think was a wonderful thing. And so one thing leads to another, and I had recommended Jennifer to them, and they offered her the commission. And I think she's written a really wonderful piece. When you do something like this, you don't know exactly how a brand new piece will work out. Not from the standpoint of we knew it would be good, but where it would fit on the program.
Sure.
And so she's written, in a way, the perfect piece to go where it falls on the program. And it has a great association with the University of Texas, because this past year was the 50th anniversary of the famous tower shooting.
Right.
Charles Whitman took the lives of 17 people and injured 30 some odd people on that day. And that was the first of the large campus incidents of that sort. And unfortunately today there have been so many other incidents, and the coinciding with this law that has passed in Texas and has passed in other places too, about allowing campus carry of concealed handguns.
Right.
There is that subtext amongst running through the piece. So it actually makes a very dramatic statement, and I couldn't have been happier with the way the piece turned out.
That's fantastic.
Then we closed the piece with another world premiere. This is Adam Schoenberg's Second Symphony, which he titles Migration. There will be a composer panel that some in your audience will have seen that'll take place on Saturday, where all the composers will be there talking about their works. And I wish Adam were here right now to tell you the story, because he was writing a piece that on the day of the election, he decided he just couldn't finish writing that piece. He basically threw that out and began writing this piece, because the subject of immigration and migration is such a hot issue in our country. Even today, as we're taping this, federal judges have just overturned the travel ban that was attempting to be imposed. And Adam's wife is an immigrant, having moved here from Peru with her family, basically under the cover of darkness, leaving everything behind. She comes from a very privileged, wealthy family in Peru, but because of political and other issues, they just needed to leave. They needed to drop everything and get out of the country.
Wow.
So they gave up an incredibly privileged life. 2 drivers, multiple cooks, staff in the home, large home and came here to the U.S., where literally her father was a custodian, a janitor, as the only work that he could find. And so that story and that struggle is obviously important to him and to her and to their family. And Adam is himself, comes from a family of immigrants. And so their children, they have 2 little boys. They are first generation Americans.
Wow.
So anyway, it tells a powerful story. And I think it is both of these last 2 pieces are so timely. So we're looking forward to it. And it's a wonderful piece. It is at times frightening and at times optimistic, and in Adam Schoenberg's unique way, tells a story, but also does it with a very fresh approach. This is his first large-scale work for the wind ensemble.
Wow.
So I love it. I'm too close to it to be objective about it, but
That's okay.
I truly love it. And I hope that our audience will also.
Wow. So
If they don't, they're a communist.
yeah. That is not the official position of the University of Texas at Austin. That's
No, that's true. That's,
you've
Maybe we should
got
edit that
tenure,
out.
right? Yeah, you're fine.
That's right.
What could possibly go wrong?
Too.
Yeah.
Right.
Can you talk about your obvious commitment to new music and to composers who are still composing? And I think that's a common theme a lot with wind ensemble music, which I think is great. A lot more than orchestrally, it would seem. But can you talk about at least your own personal commitment to that?
Sure. I think that so many of us hope that we can help in some way to add to the repertoire, because orchestral music is fantastic. It's wonderful. That does tend to be something these days of a museum, and it's not that new orchestral music is not being written. Adam has contributed to the orchestral repertoire in a significant way with several very important, Finding Rothko, picture studies, his first symphony, the American Symphony. So he is a young American composer who is writing in all mediums. So it's still certainly a viable medium. However, this phenomenon of the American wind band has so taken off in the latter half of the 20th century and now through the 21st century that there's just been an explosion of interest.
Right.
And I do think we hear it time and time again that composers are thrilled after they've had their first experience to be involved with this medium, because these groups rehearse a lot and prepare a lot and spend more time than a professional orchestra would be allotted because of, and also they have the freedom to experiment. I'm not just talking about our situation, but I'll just say that we were able to go through this, but it echoes so many other situations where Adam was able to come to Austin for the first 2 readings. Normally, I don't let composers come to first readings because they always tend to think that everything is their fault that goes wrong. But in this case, we were on a time crunch, and so we needed to do that. But it proved to be invaluable because we were essentially workshopping the piece. So then he could make changes and send things immediately to his copyist and send things back. We could try something else on Friday, and then he could make further decisions about, well, that didn't necessarily work like I thought it would, or that worked so well, now I'm going to do this a little bit better. So those 2 days were, I think, extremely well spent and profitable.
So it made it kind of a collaborative process.
Yes, I mean, he's obviously the composer of the piece.
Sure.
So, but I think it was very helpful for him to hear it, and also then just to work through that, it becomes this organic process. So it really is collaborative between not only Adam and myself, but the players in the ensemble were involved in it, making suggestions and asking questions. And so I think that it was just a very happy time, I'll say.
Well, that's great. So, do you think that that wind band audiences are more receptive to new music because it gets programmed more, or do you think that they were to begin with, or do you think that orchestral audiences are just as ready for it and just aren't treated to it?
I think it's a little of all of that in a way, because I think there is an interesting combination, because people will say, well, orchestral audiences are staid and stale a little bit, and they just want to hear Beethoven, Mozart, etc. However, when new pieces appear that are significant new pieces, and they thrill an audience just like they would thrill an audience in any other medium, but the performers and the conductor have to be totally involved in it and engaged, and sometimes speaking about the piece or the way the piece is programmed, what else surrounds it, those all become very important things. And the engagement with the composer. I will just tell you, there's a famous recording of the world premiere performance of the Corigliano Clarinet Concerto that's on, the only place it's available is in the Centennial of the Philharmonic, the boxed set. But it is so amazing because the audience reaction at the end of the piece is just over the top, like a sporting event. There's so much pent up energy in the room that the place just explodes.
That's awesome.
And that was in 1977, and those kind of reactions still occur when the music is arresting, and when it's presented with commitment. So I do think more of it happens in the wind ensemble medium, fortunately for us, because we're still growing this medium.
In orchestral circles, you can definitely hear people refer to Bartok as contemporary music.
Sure, Rite of Spring is still.
Yeah, yep. So I think maybe that Rite of Spring story too about the audience rioting is so ingrained that some people think that audiences can't handle it, but
which is interesting because the reaction at that which is legendary, and of course we know happened, but it was really at the time more directed toward the choreography and the dancing than it was to the music. The first performance of the Rite of Spring as an orchestral work solely received an enormous extended ovation, and people loved it. But I think it was more the choreography and the dancing, but it certainly made for a famous story.
Yeah, it sure did. So, so can you talk a little bit? You were talking about the Jolly, and you knew that it was going to be a great piece, but how it fit. And can you talk a little bit about how you approach programming from you have to challenge the students, and you have to have the right flow, and you want to involve new composers, and there's just so many. I've come in from the chamber music side of the business primarily. It's that was always a huge. No, I'm a tuba player. So we always had to deal with that as well. There has to be a flow. There has to be a beginning, a middle, an end, and that has to go for each of the halves. And
has to make
there's
sense.
A story arc, So,
exactly.
But you have to, in a lot of ways, your job is more challenging because you only have 5 works. I mean, there's only so many orders and so many chamber music. There's there's at least the chamber music that I played, we had 6-7 pieces per tune. So there was a lot more combinations. So how do you approach programming?
It's in this case, it was not without thought. I will assure people of that. And I knew from the beginning, like I mentioned, that I wanted to do the Montague piece. To me, it's a great opening because it begins so quietly and has this incredible build to it. And I suppose you could play it after intermission. It could go there maybe equally well, but it makes a thrilling beginning to the concert. So it seemed to me that was obvious. Because he's quoting Renaissance music, I also knew that I wanted to do this transcription of the Corigliano, which also quotes Gabrielli. And first very quietly in the third movement, and then there's this enormous climax, which is one of the great moments in the history of Western music when the Sonata Pianoforte comes back in at the end of that piece. So I knew that there would be some relationship between those two pieces, so I thought that this could work really well. The other 2 pieces, I didn't know what they would turn out to be because they're brand new. In both cases, the composers knew that they would be performed here at this conference. But I wanted them to write what they wanted to write. And in Adam's case, we commissioned a big piece. That's what we wanted. And he immediately said he would like for it to be his 2nd symphony. Although there's some question about what people are calling symphonies these days, and we won't get into that long discussion. But I didn't say it needs a big ending, or I just wanted him to write what was in him at the time, and he certainly did that. And actually, it has this big triumphant ending, and so we knew that could close the concert. In Jennifer's case, I didn't say I want something that maybe has some extended, quiet, soloistic. It's just that's the way it worked out. So it makes a really good program. But had it not worked out that way with those 2 pieces, I felt like I had some flexibility because the Corigliano Clarinet Concerto is one of those rare pieces that could, as a concerto, close a concert.
Yeah, that's not common.
It doesn't often happen, but if it needed to go last on the program, it could because of the impact of it, like Beethoven Violin Concerto, and it's a big piece.
Sure.
But as it turned out, with the way the Jennifer's piece and Adam's piece, the way those pieces developed, then this was a logical way to put them together. And we've performed this concert twice now, and with intermission in between the Corigliano and Jennifer's piece. Here, as I mentioned, it'll be no intermission, but we'll go with something of a break. But I still think the seam and the flow of the concert I hope will be effective.
So I'm sure that you've adjudicated a lot of assessments and things like that over time. What's the most common mistake that you would find with band directors in terms of programming?
I'll have to say I don't adjudicate anymore.
Right.
But
you don't have that much going on. I'm surprised that you don't fill your time. We haven't even talked about Dallas. I mean, you got so much going on. It's
the philosophical
crazy
discussion about
sure.
it. But nonetheless, I will. Even when you go to hear school bands perform, the thing that strikes me most often, as wonderful as so many school bands are, that very often you can say, as a program, I'm not sure that really works. They're just 3 interesting pieces, but I'm not sure how those really are coordinated.
Right.
But also, to make a sweeping generalization, maybe it's a little too difficult.
Right.
Yeah, a person only has so much energy at a time to be spending on their performance, and so if they're maxing out that energy on the technical demands of the piece, there's nothing left
Sure.
to really get into the more intuitive aspect of the music making.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe that would be one. It's always difficult to make sweeping generalizations.
Sure.
But
Well, and I asked you to do that, so yeah, it was kind of like a broad, loaded question.
Sure.
So, yeah, my wife
Thanks
is
for
yeah, you're welcome. That's why I get paid the big bucks. So you can thank Dave. So,
Right.
my wife is a middle school band director in Fairfax County,
Right.
Virginia, and I hear her talking about, and she works with a lot of student teachers, and I've heard her talk to a lot of people about programming, and it's boy, there's a
what
lot
we do. I mean, the programming is it's the most important thing that we do, actually.
right.
So when it's not done well, then that creates another whole level of problems, either because the music is all too difficult,
Right.
all too easy, or the pieces don't flow, and it's too much the same. It's all too much the same composer. It's all too much there are many things that can
Same
happen
key
with
if
that.
it's a middle school
Oh
or
my
something
gosh,
like that. Yeah. There's a lot of factors. So
devoid of counterpoint. I mean, there's a lot
Right.
of things that can go into the mix there.
there are so many factors to being a band director, which is why whenever I hear anyone is double majoring in music ed as a fallback option, it makes me just shake my head. So
There's a great quote by David Mamet who says, people who become artists and give themselves a fallback option, well, they're going to fall back on it. Because
yes.
that means they always intended to do that, or else they wouldn't have given themselves the option anyway.
Amen
So
to that.
There's if you're going to be committed to something, you do that and not.
I got lucky at an early age just with when the opportunity presented itself with Boston Brass, but my only plan was that I was not going to be 75 and sitting in a rocking chair saying I didn't do everything I could have done.
Exactly.
Yeah, I didn't know when my line in the sand was going to be or when I was going to have to go with plan B, but I didn't have a fallback option. I just don't think I was too lazy to have a fallback option, so I'm not taking credit there.
Well,
But
I'm sure that's not the case at all. I'm sure it was that you were focused.
Yeah, I
and
was-
you knew
I was
that
quite
I've gotta-
focused.
I just got to do this.
I decided, this is a true story, 6th grade, I was in the shower one day before school, and I declared that I was going to become a professional tuba player.
There you go.
6th grade. First of all, I was a 6th grader taking a shower, which already is impressive if I may
Weirdo.
pat myself on the back.
Right.
But I just declared that. I got out. I was like, "Hey, Dad, I'm going to become a professional tuba player." He said, "Work really hard. Good for you. Yeah, you can do it." Yeah. So
That's great. You had family support.
yes, yep, and my mom too. And I'm probably thinking like, "Yeah, we got to come up with a plan B for him." So, but yeah, So anyway, I was lucky. So, and actually, speaking of that, you had said that it was okay to ask you about this. You recently just lost your father,
Yes.
and which the outpouring of tributes to him on Facebook was quite moving, which has been nice because there's been a lot of Facebook. I don't know if you've noticed, it hasn't been super
Right.
productive of late. But your father was a band director.
He was.
Yeah, and he was your band director, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And my wife, we both played in his Victoria High School band, both clarinetists, 1 year apart. And he influenced a lot of people. Not only the people who were fortunate enough to play in his band, but also just in Texas music education circles. He was a leader in the Texas Music Educators Association, president of TMEA, and he had one of those legendary band programs, which at the time, as a student, and of course, growing up with it, I admittedly I was going to band concerts in the womb, and then I don't know that I wouldn't say that I didn't appreciate it. I think that's a triple negative in there, but I appreciated it a great deal, but I don't think I fully appreciated it because I didn't know how unusual the situation I was in truly was.
It's kind of impossible to in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I thought everybody's high school band played the Schoenberg theme and variations and the Hindemith Symphony, and I just thought that was a way of life, and everybody was doing the same sort of things.
Sure.
But I was able to see in his model a really fine musician, which he was. So he always played. Even he had given up the clarinet and the saxophone, those were his principal instruments, only a couple of years before he passed away. But he was still practicing piano.
So until the age of 87 or
He was
something?
89 and 3/4
Wow.
when he passed away this last week.
So he was playing like through his mid-80s.
Absolutely.
Crazy.
And loved it. He loved music.
Wow.
And this was some people know about this, but obviously it's when this happens at a difficult time. My wife and I had gone down. We were able to see him this past Monday and Tuesday. He passed away on Friday, and he so had hoped to be here, or at least at the concert in Austin, and he told me then again, I really wanted to hear that clarinet concerto. So, but he was a really sweet guy who meant a lot to a lot of people. So,
wow,
miss him terribly, but so many people have gone through this, and it's no one would have understood better than him. And in fact, we talked about this. He told me, I mean, you got to do what you got to do, and so you've made it. The show goes on, and so anyway, we're here. But like for the rest of my life, I'll think of him every day.
Wow, boy, he. It's pretty. I mean, I think that I've only been a parent for 3 years now, so I'm not speaking from lots of wisdom. He's got 6 grandkids sitting over there, but
we have our first granddaughter, which is the best.
Oh, that's great. That's awesome. Yeah, because you can hand them back to the parents, right? Yeah, like I'm the guy that it gets handed to. So yeah, and I've just started that duty. But,
all the fun and none of the responsibility.
Yeah, there you go. But I can't imagine how proud he must have been of you, because he not only he knew all of the great stuff that you've accomplished. So yeah,
he was.
That must have been special.
He was proud, but I was proud of him too.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, we are really looking forward to your performance on Saturday. What time is the performance on Saturday?
7:30 p.m.
7:30 p.m. And
we're looking forward to it as well.
Yeah, with that description of those pieces that you gave of like all the players around the hall, I think if anybody wasn't interested, they are now. So,
well, I hope so. I wish everyone could be here to experience all these. But because even on the Montague, I left out the fact that they're not only at the end, but we have percussionists that are moving around on stage and processing, and Adam's piece actually has some processing of percussionists also. But I don't know that this hall, the setup, is going to allow that to happen. That's one of the reasons we're rehearsing tonight, is to try to get a game plan together.
Great.
Got to work out our choreography.
Good luck, and thank you so much for joining us.
I appreciate it.